Welcome to UnityNow, the podcast where we discuss unity stemming from the Unity 2020 plan with one goal in mind: bring unity to America and end the Republican-Democrat duopoly. This podcast is created, produced, hosted, recorded, edited, and publicized by a wonderful team of Unity volunteers that came together from all over the country to collaborate in a completely remote environment. To provide a brief introduction to Unity, we offer this. Unity 2020 was an idea that started when Brett Weinstein announced the plan on the Joe Rogan Experience in mid-June 2020. From there, the movement was born, and since then, tens of thousands of volunteers have signed up, organized, and begun to create a groundswell of support. The plan always introduced a fail-safe so we would not be an election spoiler. This was to end the plans for the 2020 election if it was determined there was no viable path to the White House. Sadly, this became the case. In keeping our promise, this failsafe was executed and announced by Brett Weinstein. However, we believe Unity continues to be the number one antidote for what ails the country right now, and so we are pressing on with a renewed spirit. To learn more and become a volunteer, visit articlesofunity.org and check out Brett Weinstein's YouTube page and the Articles of Unity YouTube page for the weekly campfires.
Welcome to UnityNow podcast, where we discuss unity stemming from the Unity 2020 plan with one goal in mind: bringing unity to America and ending the Republican-Democrat duopoly. My name is Gabe Garber. I'm your host today, and I'm joined by another fellow Unity volunteer, Nate Smolensky. A little brief bio. We'll get a little bit more of him, but we had him on because he's had some previous affiliation with the Centrist Project or Unite America. Has a little bit of background running for Congress, which I'm sure we can dig into if we wanted there, if he wants. And he also writes some political, thought-provoking articles under the pseudonym Samuel Handwich, focusing on the nature of polarization and how we can fight against it. So plenty to talk about, plenty in alignment with our unity movement in whatever form it currently is in. So without any further ado, we'll just, welcome to the show, Nate.
It's great to be here.
Granted, like setting aside the simple rundown of the bullet list of introducing you, is there anything I missed? Is there anything you want to elaborate on before we get into things?
I do think at some point I do want to talk about one of the reasons I connected and one of the reasons I brought up my Unite America affiliation was an article I put out a few weeks ago where I sort of thought, hey, maybe we can combine these ideas. So a unified unity idea is definitely something I'd love to get more into.
Yeah, definitely. Even reading a little bit up before this, I'd noticed I wasn't too familiar with Unite America, but reading some of the stuff, the articles of Unity, or, I don't know exactly what they called them, but there's so much that's overlapping and shares the same kind of common agenda, maybe not, piece by piece, but overarching, a lot of similarities, a lot of stuff that we can maybe learn from your experience with that, how we might move forward, and just, having that, the grassroots organization background experience from that as well. I guess, maybe to start, we always kind of like to hear just your pathway, like how people got to Unity. It's always usually an interesting story,
I guess, where do I begin? Well, so briefly, a few years ago, in the lead up to the 2018 election, so this was probably over the course of a year before that, I was sort of energized by the election of Donald Trump, not because I liked him, not because I didn't like him, but because it was sort of a vindication of, I had been saying, things are going this way. This is it's a polarization that's feeding on itself, and the messages that are working are the more divisive messages, and there's something to this. And left alone, this is a cycle that seemed to me is going in a very unsavory place. So that really motivated me to seek out, I want to be a part of something different. So I found the Centrist Project. They were great. They became Unite America in, I want to say, February of 2018. Around that time, I thought, maybe to really put some energy around this locally, if people aren't seeing the appeal in discussing abstract ideas or just political philosophy, wouldn't it be so nice if this, that, I thought, hey, maybe if I run for office, I can sort of make it feel more tangible, more real, this idea of, change can happen. It's not necessarily we've got the best shot, but maybe this is what we need to really get people going and get people paying attention. And that had mixed results. Anyway, we can talk a little more about that later. So that was my sort of introduction to this broader third way. I don't know what the collective description is, but these other ways of thinking as they approach politics and this anti-duopoly movement. And it was definitely an exciting time. Obviously, my campaign could have gone better, and
yeah. So I guess a little bit of background. Where?
Sure.
Yeah, where was this? What you were running for Congress?
Yeah. So I said, one of the ideas I had is, and sort of it was in a similar position to how I am now, where I just had, maybe we can do a little bit of a different approach in terms of the high-level political strategy. I saw Unite America. Unite America was fielding sort of centrist independent candidates in areas where there was a pretty close two-party split. And I thought that would be where the spoiler effect is greatest, and that would be the most difficult arena for an independent. So I thought, well, I live in deep blue Massachusetts at that time, and here it's effectively one-party domination. Maybe this is the place where you really need an independent party, because you can take advantage of sort of the primary success of more divisive politicians, which was kind of nascent at the time. It was actually, as the 2018 election went on, again, vindicated, but sort of Pyrrhic victory there of, these further left, further right politicians winning these primaries. And, it's against a candidate like that where, in theory, if you have a sort of an independent with broad appeal, you have this minority party that has no candidate at all. You've got all of them who are closer to you on the spectrum. You've got a lot of independents, moderates, centrists who are feeling disenfranchised, who maybe feel like they don't have a candidate, and suddenly, that's your natural base. And you might even have, the moderates, or even what used to be the core of the majority party, where they may have mixed feelings about this far left or far right candidate. And I thought, hey, that's the model. And, instead of just saying in the abstract, this is the model, maybe I should run.
A learning experience, It sounds like.
It's definitely a learning experience. I think that's a fair way to put it. For a little more detail, that ended up being, so this was Mike Capuano's district at the time, for those who know congressional politics well. And one of the factors that made it very hard to get off the ground is Capuano was very popular. He was about a 9 or 10 term Democrat from the same town as I was, which was Somerville, where I was living at the time. And people liked him, and I liked him. One of the things I tried to do was be a little more positive, and say, I'm just saying, here's a different idea. It's not that
I'm not
it's
necessarily
an
running
indictment
against
of
him.
whoever is. Yeah.
I'm just pitching a new
Sure.
model.
So a lot of me not being able to get off the ground was, hey, there's a really popular incumbent here. As it turned out, he got primaried. And that ended up being Ayanna Presley's district, which it is now. Nothing against Congresswoman Presley. I actually was fairly aware of her at that time, but a lot of people didn't see that coming. But once again, vindicated.
There's a deeper yearning that something wasn't working.
Yes.
And it sounds
Something wasn't working.
Something wasn't working, and the vindication comes from that, like, just recognizing something, not necessarily putting the finger directly on what it is, but which is, I think, what we're all, toiling into obscurity trying to do. But there is that feeling of just recognizing, like, not feeling represented, or just saying, like, as things could be better, and we don't really seem to have too many voices advocating for
it is. Yeah. And after that season, one, I was burned out, and two, I sort of fell into this trap that I think a lot of people in the Unity base, people in the core demographic of moderates, people looking for a third way, people who are sort of feeling alienated from both parties, fall into, is I was kind of ambivalent. And I said, maybe if the system is broken, like, I do the best for myself, and I sort of don't worry about the politics. And I think it's easier to fall into that when you don't have a camp that you really believe in, when you don't have a tribe you're fervently supporting. You can tune out, and especially when it gets so negative and as ugly as it did. And I did, and then I did a little writing at that time, but again, it was sort of tuned out, and then as this year went along, I'm seeing things get heated again, seeing things build up towards the election, thinking more about politics, sort of wondering, what I can do, and along comes, Brett's podcast on the Joe Rogan Experience, and it's like, oh, that's an idea. That's a little bit of a long shot campaign. I know all about those, this couldn't possibly fail worse than anything I've already been a part of. So, let's get back on the saddle, and let's try to do something. I became very involved with the Facebook groups. I know both the Articles of Unity group and the Healing the Divide group, which is sort of one of the unofficial ones. And the community has been great. It's just one of the big things that attracted me to these centrist groups in the past is I did a little political volunteering with more mainstream things. Not that it was for one of the political parties, but it was more movements with a clear political tilt. And at times it did feel like there was a lot of echoing of the same ideas, a lot of rah-rah, and not a lot of creative thought. And I don't want to besmirch them, obviously. I'm not calling those organizations by name for that reason. But my very first meeting with the Centrist Project, I actually had to come down to New York because there wasn't a local chapter for me. And it opens with, so we're the Centrist Project, and then the group, which was like a 10 or 12 person meet up at a bar, started arguing about what centrist meant, and this went on for about half an hour. And clearly having so many independent thinkers, free thinkers, has its downsides, but it was still exciting to be around, and it was it felt good to be around people who were thinking differently and who had ideas that I hadn't heard before, and who just really wanted positive things and wanted very creative solutions and pragmatic solutions to very positive goals. Made some great connections there, made some great connections this year, and
Great. Yeah, I mean, I can resonate with plenty of that. I don't know if you've historically been, I guess, like, politically homeless is the kind of buzzword. I personally can attest to being kind of a lifelong independent for the most part, but I'm just curious if that matches up with your timeline, or if it's shifted that way over your lifetime.
I think for me it was fairly early on. I think I grew up in, again, very deep blue Massachusetts, so my town was about as far left as I don't know, as liberal in those days, they would say, as a town can get. And my family had sort of a Soviet immigrant, almost reactionary tilt, where it was, socialism is the enemy. It's rather hawkish, rather very fiscally conservative, not socially conservative, but still, very adamant about these things. So I was in close proximity to these two camps who were constantly yelling that the other was crazy. And as I always tell the story, at some point I realized they were right. And so that was sort of my first idea of, I don't really buy that. And I take it further than I think a lot of people, in that sometimes I'm just not convinced that there is a right side of an issue. And I don't really buy into that.
Yeah. I even kind of think the dynamic of the centrist definition is also a good way to, like, kind of circle around the same point, where it's like, it's a lot of people, it's not that a group of 10 or 12 people are consisting of 10 or 12 people who all find themselves in the middle. They're centrist by virtue of all, choosing to come together and find common ground, and as basically just averaging everything out, there is the fact that they come together at all is proof that there is some type of holding ground where all of them, can come together and work things out, or try to, just pitch new ideas and see what works, see what sticks.
It's exciting. It's definitely it's fun to see new ideas is a recurring theme, for sure.
Yeah, well, in a system that seems to be continuing to push out more of the same, it's, I don't know, again, it is refreshing whenever something else comes on, even if it is a long shot. So that's another thing our team is always talking about. It's the struggle of what we're advocating for is, maybe the least, it's the least clickbaity. It's not exciting. It's not sexy to have people who just agree all the time, or even agree to disagree, and just, like, cordially have conversations. So there is, like, a little bit of a lack of appeal that to draw from inherently. You'll get more clicks with
that is. And I think That is one of the fundamental problems that I felt like at times, people I was around, people I did encounter who had a more centrist outlook, didn't think enough about that problem of, oh, this is less sexy. Like, there's a reason the viral approach works. You can have as much, good news, wholesome content, um, just high quality journalism on the internet as you want, like these independent blogs. But the viral content, the stuff that plays to these vulnerabilities, it's going to rise to the top because that's what the environment is. And at the end of the day, if you want to push political change, you have to gain political ground. You have to gain electoral ground. And trying to appeal to people with something that's less appealing, with something that's not working because it is inherently less able to work within the current environments is nonsensical. And I think balancing that and trying to figure out, wait, how do we make this work? Because, the problem we're seeing isn't just that there's this bad thing, it's that the bad thing is incentivized. And the bad thing is the thing that works, and the thing that is being selected for is this sort of divisive, polarizing, rile up your tribe, doesn't matter, what the other side thinks, because the other side isn't listening. And that's the sort of politics that succeeds. And if you want to push against that, you have to first respect, okay, this isn't working just because there's some hack who decided to try it. This is working because this is what works. And how do we change that?
Yeah. Well,
For sure.
yeah. So how do we change that?
I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, what are you working on, I guess, now? I mean, elections passed us just about officially, but not quite. We're recording this on Sunday, December 6th.
Yes,
so yeah,
yes. Yeah.
for all intents and
I
purposes.
had a line. Yeah. Um, I had a line that I was happy with in a recent article, which was, with the election, we're so divided right now that even the dust refuses to settle. Um, so I've been writing. Occasionally I'll write about policy ideas. Occasionally I'll try to float solutions. A lot of my writing is the nature of polarization, the nature of why is it that we're not getting along, and how is it that we can coalesce when there is no longer a monoculture, when we're hearing so many different things, when we're being pushed apart. Like, where do we find that common ground? And one of the big things that I've been pushing through the Unity movement, and something I had an article on a few weeks ago, was, hey, maybe there's really something here in terms of looking back at Unite America. Unite America was, and I feel like I haven't really introduced the organization much, so I should talk a little about them. Unite America was a push for independent candidates to gain electoral ground, which, with the end goal, so they were pushing for state senates in very closely divided states, and they were pushing for the Senate itself on the national level. And the idea of this is, it's the fulcrum. If you have a coalition in the center, or a group in the center that doesn't belong to either party, that is large enough to deny either party a majority, then even, you don't have to have 30 members of a 100-seat legislative body yourself. If it's 10 members, that's enough to do it. you wield a tremendous amount of power. You become the swing voter, and you get to control a lot of what's going to be able to pass. And not only does that fight against single party domination, you can counteract gridlock with that. You can sort of force through a lot of more positive stuff. You can make more compromise happen. You can just make the whole thing much more positive, and that's how you actually make a difference. Now, one of the problems that they ran into is the independent candidates. They're inherently outsiders. A lot of them didn't have that much renown. They just weren't known figures within the political sphere. Some of them weren't the most visible necessarily, weren't the most attractive candidates. They were some great candidates. I actually talked to a few during that time, and they were awesome. They were pushing for great stuff, but again, it was not well positioned to succeed. And so I saw that. I saw this great end goal that made a lot of sense to me of the fulcrum, but there was a means of getting there that just wasn't adding up. And what I saw with Unity this year, and I glommed onto this fairly quickly, is this is a much better model at getting attention, because it's tapping into this sort of intellectual dark web energy and this sort of community of free thinking writers, podcasters, sometimes even politicians that had formed this de facto center. And it was just incredible. I think, it's something we almost take for granted, is our ability, for whatever political success we didn't achieve, to be able to get an audience, to get podcasts with Crenshaw, Gabbard, Justin Amash, and Joe Rogan's podcast it's the biggest podcast in America. I think you're not going to get much better media platforms than that. And suddenly, so here was an incredible thing. It was also one of the other things that struck me is this appeal to sitting politicians, for them to take up the mantle, for those to be your flag bearers. That made a lot of sense. That was sort of just, it seemed to me like, oh, that's a bit of the secret sauce right there, is, these are much more attractive candidates. They are, at least in theory, and these are, having those people on your team saves you so many steps and overcomes so many of the critical hurdles. And sort of, I wondered if, at this point, I wondered if I was the only person at the chocolate company who knew the peanut butter recipe. And I wondered if we could put these things together and say, okay, well, what if instead of, trying to climb the highest mountain possible with these, which is asking these candidates to run for president and, run for whatever our controls are against being a spoiler, but just run into all these obstacles and all these risks and all this animosity. What if we don't ask them to take that leap? What if we say, hey, let's build a coalition from within Congress, from within the Senate, and let's appeal to legislators, which we're already doing, and say, here are these articles of unity, here's this groundswell, here's this energy for something different. Will you sign on to this? Will you become a part of something different, something to counteract all this tribalism and division and destructive nature to our politics. I mean, they don't even have to necessarily leave their parties. But if you can get a bipartisan coalition like that, and I think one of the other things that I loved about Unity is this one from the left, one from the right model, where it really demonstrates to people that you're not just taking from one side. You're not a secret Democratic ploy. You're not a secret Republican ploy. And if you can take that model and say, hey, one Democratic congressperson, one Republican congressperson, sign on to the Articles of Unity, pledge to, fight for unity principles, that can go a huge, huge way. And on top of all that, you have an election result in terms of the way the legislature is looking. It has never been easier in recent history to create a fulcrum with that, because the split is so tight. And maybe, again, it's just reaching out the same way we have, but asking, hey, instead of running for president, just stay in the office you are now, but show that you're a champion of these principles, and show that this group of unifiers exists. They exist in both parties. They exist at the top levels of at least legislative government, and they're going to take a stand against this duopoly that is being so destructive right now.
Yeah, I think one of the things I always kind of keep coming back to as well is it allowed us to not even necessarily, I guess, pull people in or ask them to join, although that was part of it. We were able to highlight and pick and choose the people who already seemed to exhibit those characteristics and those qualities. So it's like, you don't really have to even do what you're, anything different than what you're doing, but we notice, one, that you're already exhibiting these qualities, these characteristics that are resonating with a lot of people here, and a lot of these people don't feel adequately represented by what they currently have on offer. So it's not even necessarily that you have to come aboard, because we don't even know what exactly you're coming aboard. Is this a party? I think that's part of that, there's a mechanism in place that kind of pushed and made it seem like maybe we were more of a party than we were. So, but really all we want to do is highlight what's already there, and maybe find people who haven't fully been purchased by the system, the duopoly that we ominously refer to, and just let them know that there is this group of support, however big it may or may not be, and just I don't know, having a little bit of skin in the game, so to speak, give them a sense of having support, and we've got your back. You've got cover going
in terms of what it is. I think the closest thing I found to what sounds like it could make sense is a bicameral caucus, just a group within the legislature that can work together more directly, more effectively, and say, these are people who want to unify, who want to stand for unity principles, and who are going to push ideas that run counter to the sort of duopoly stances and the tired things that we see again and again and again from the same politicians.
Yeah.
And I think if you frame it that way, it's a much smaller ask. It's a more realistic ask, and it's something that seems to me maybe people can energize around.
Yeah.
So.
Do you feel like with your experience with Unite America, were there things within that maybe the unity movement has not done, that we might be suffering for not taking on some of those ideas or strategies, or vice versa, or just thinking in general. There's a number of other like kind of center-leaning organizations that are, or center-leaning, a number of organizations that are tend to be occupying that middle ground and aimed at unifying against the polarization. Like what kind of things can we learn from, I guess in your case, you have the experience with Unite, but in general, how can we coalesce these organizations potentially to take the strengths of each of them and yeah.
I mean, I think the biggest thing from Unite America, and I've touched on this a bit, is there was a lot less fixation on the executive. I think looking from afar, especially you, and the farther away you're looking, the easier it is to reduce the picture to, oh, what's the government like in America? Well, so and so's president. That's the government. And if you want to enact change, oh, you get a different president. And what Unite America was doing very well is it was laying out something that made sense from an electoral standpoint and made sense from impacting bodies that are better designed to be influenced and to be affected this way. The other thing is the strength of the executive is one of the problems at hand. And this is something that I've pointed to a couple times, where the further apart we divide, the more fervently tribal we become, the stronger we're going to keep making our executives, because more and more gets justified. If you have your person in power and they're fighting for your things, of course you want them to be as strong as they possibly can, because you're fighting against your enemy, you're fighting for justice and all this. And as a result, as polarization has increased, we've put more and more and more power into the executive branch, which of course, like any polarizing effect, it feeds on itself. And people who don't like the executive get more and more energized and push their candidates, and when their candidates win, they put more power there again. And instead of saying, hey, we're going to make someone else the executive, which was the early focus, it was the focus of Unity 2020, and it makes a lot of sense. But I think that fixation maybe made the task harder than it needed to be. And that's the biggest thing about Unite America, is Unite America didn't want to field a presidential candidate, didn't feel like they needed to field a presidential candidate, didn't think it was worth the trouble of fielding a presidential candidate. Now they're further outside popular systems that we've been so lucky to be close to, in terms of the major podcast publications and, again, these connections with people already in the game. So for them, of course, they may not aim as high, but I think going for legislative success, it's still not easy, but it can make an incredible, just a world of difference. And I think that's something maybe we underestimate. Again, not to be critical of the movement, which certainly energized me, energized a lot of other people. But I think from Unite America, that's the biggest thing I think we should take away, is the fulcrum strategy and the fulcrum focus of The legislature is where, if you have 10% of the group, you make all the difference, you wield a lot of the power, and this is, as it is structured, the best place to make a difference.
Yeah. Well, and that makes sense too, even just factoring in the number of opportunities to do that. You have much more nodes of, potential entrance into the game, so to speak. So that makes sense. And as far as moving forward, we seem to be kind of in a nebulous phase or kind of a, disembodiment to kind of maybe rise again moving forward, looking forward to midterms and future elections. But yeah, there is something about just aiming for the top prize and only aiming on that, where it's an all or nothing kind of gamble, as opposed to a series of smaller gambles that, if you get lucky on a few of them, it doesn't require a whole lot to make a bit of change.
And what we see as the top prize may not even be the top prize. If you have, and Congress passes the laws, they write the laws, and they can if you want to dream even bigger, you can actually reduce the power of the executive through Congress and through legislative acts. So if you, again, it's just, the executive is the easiest thing to glom onto, and the easiest thing to understand as, oh yeah, this is the person in charge, but our government thankfully doesn't really work that way. And maybe having this alternative route is something we can focus on, and something. The other thing about the sort of plan that I've put out, or the idea that I've put out, is maybe we don't need to be seeking electoral success at all for now. Maybe it's just reaching out to these sitting Congress people and reaching out to these sitting senators, and more as you build up, as the idea becomes realer and realer of, hey, there's a unity coalition building, and it's there to really stand against the divisive politics. And hey, if it gets a few more members, it's going to wield a tremendous amount of political power. Once you get a few steps that way, I think we may find that it's not that hard to get the ball rolling and get people on board. Again, not to wait until 2022, but to say, we're going to build this center with ideas, with a refreshing, positive message, with something really that we haven't seen in this country's politics in a long, long time. And I think I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe that's an idea we can use.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it seems to overlap quite a bit with stuff we're doing. So I think it is helpful to explore what other avenues we can, and just recognizing that, I think one of the biggest things is being pitted as, going up from the center, maybe trying to rise up, and you're getting it from both sides. The defense is coming up, again, the duopoly being the thing. It's you're facing resistance from both parties to even one of the easiest things targets is just questioning legitimacy. So as long as, if you could get one or two Congress people on board, or at least to just kind of in some way endorse or just, embody those, the articles, the qualities that we're looking for and calling for. I think just that first bit of legitimacy would go a long way for a lot of people who bought in, initially with it's just a spoiler thing, or this isn't legitimate. So once that, I think that's the big thing, is that first step is finding some way to gain a bit of legitimacy for, I think you would I think a lot more people would come out of the woodworks beyond our organization of volunteers and however big that is. I think a lot of people might resonate with a group who recognizes that things are broken in a lot more ways than it seems, and with the general aim towards making things better moving forward, or just trying new things out, being willing to do something other than what we've just come to be accustomed to. Looking at some of the articles I like that you've written, I again seeing the forging common ground or finding common ground so that we can forge solutions for more people, country over party being a big thing, especially with Unite America. A lot of these are the same kind of overlapping ideological similarities that we have like within the unity movement. And again, it's just kind of I don't know. I guess what curious as what your plan is moving forward on the individual level, continuing writing, getting involved directly again once you come back from the beach. What do you have in store?
I mean, it's nice out here on the beach. I don't know exactly when I'm gonna be so motivated as to come back, but yeah, definitely continuing writing, putting ideas out there again, trying to find something that can resonate, and not only can resonate, but can find its audience. Putting more ideas into the ether. One of the things that I think is missing from, again, what I see as sort of our de facto center, our visible center in American politics, in this intellectual dark web, is so much of the content and discourse that's coming out of it is critical. It's, well, both sides are wrong. Okay, but what are you proposing? And I think in terms of actual ideas and actual policy solutions, there is not much other than saying very legitimately, well, this plan is going to have this problems, but this plan is going to have this problem. And again, I agree with that assessment for most of these things where it comes up, but it allows people to reduce this notion of a center to, oh, it's just compromise. It's what's the example people always use? It's you're 50% in favor of insert terrible thing here, and when it sounds like that, when it's just compromise for the sake of compromise and this weird technocratic thing, it's very unattractive. And so again, one of the things that I like to explore is like, how do we really take new approaches to things? One person actually that I would point to as being a model for this, and this was someone who wrote around 10 years ago, I want to say, maybe more than that, Mark Satin. And he had an idea of radical centrism that I think was fascinating. I want to say he had a book on that, but this is someone who doesn't get discussed enough. And people, I think, within the Unity movement may find those kinds of ideas really interesting. Is like, it's not about compromising. It's not about maintaining the status quo, certainly. Like, one side wants to move right, one side wants to move left. Well, the people in the center clearly want to stay where we are. Who wants to stay where we are? It's a terrible place. No, you have this bipartisan, not even bipartisan, but you have a pragmatic approach and say, hey, let's take ideas from everywhere. Let's understand that any idea is capable of going wrong. It's not necessarily being wrong, but running into trouble. And understanding that positive solutions can be found from anywhere. Let's try to build towards something. Utilizing one idea that I've pushed a few times is really emphasizing national service programs. Not necessarily making it mandatory, but I think this is something that's just not being talked about at all. And this is a way to address some fundamental problems of kids are feeling like they're just not being fulfilled, like they lack perspective, they feel alienated, they feel unaccomplished, and they're raking in mountains of debt because we've had this sort of cultural emphasis on college, basically for the sake of having kids go to college for the sake of having kids go to college, which has completely lost the plot. And one of the ideas I've put out there is if we have them, again, not mandatory, but like if we put a cultural emphasis on do a service program for a while, not only is that going to set them up better for the world of the future, it's a way to it gives us a huge manpower resource to address problems like, oh, hey, we can have teachers, counselors, mentors for these critical inner city schools and community centers, and they can really, really help some of the kids there. Or we can, clean up the highways, or we can have a big nursing or even, emergency response group. You can do all sorts of cool things with that resource. And then it sort of ties into, as some of the old Yang Gang members may resonate with, you're building for the post-automation world where people are still going to need people, and putting a lot of emphasis into these service industries, because if you have these big growing service programs, you're going to need people to train, to support, and you're going to be shifting jobs that way. That's where jobs are going to need to shift in the long run. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent there, but
No,
I have the airtime. I think it's
I think it's very important, and there's other aspects of that are harder to quantify, but similar of just having done one of those experiences, whatever that is, if it's contributing to something, contributing to this country, whether that's one job or another, it also facilitates a more direct buy-in for the participants as well, so they have a better sense of ownership of their share of this country, and so I think there's plenty of room to expand that idea as well, and just building a sense of whether or not it needs to come out as pride or patriotism. Obviously those kind of have their own connotations that come with it, but even just at the individual level, thinking of if I put work into something, I'm going to care much more about it, and the same can be said with the national service opportunities, and there's a wide range of those that can be looked into and explored.
But again, the broader point of why I'm bringing this up is this is what I see as an outside-the-box idea. This is something that the Democrats aren't talking about. It's something the Republicans aren't talking about on a high level. And getting ideas like that, finding something, like if people don't like that idea, if they're resistant to that idea, okay, fine. Maybe it's not as attractive as I initially think it to be, but let's find some ideas. Let's create an identity that builds on creative solutions, because we talk about, hey, we need, more free thinkers. We need to be free from this constrained tribal thinking in the way we think about politics. Well, let's stop saying that and start showing it. Like, what are the creative solutions? What would, this great third way be? And I think finding those ideas and having something more for people to coalesce around. Also, to tie in with, if unity does whatever future pushes unity has, like, having a few of these ideas might make sense on an organizational level, where people know what we stand for. People have a few examples of, these are the things we're bringing to the table. This is the approach to political problem solving that we are bringing to the table. Not just, hey, we're not tribalist followers, and we're not, but what does that mean is something that's harder for people to glom onto, and having a few of those things, I think, would be a big deal.
Yeah, and I think finding things with wider appeal stands to kind of break through that team mentality of it's a red idea, therefore it's a bad idea, or it's a blue idea, therefore it's a bad idea, or if it's neither, then all bets are off, and you're coming from crazy town,
And you have to find the ideas that haven't been poisoned by tribal association. It's like, what hasn't been politicized?
Yeah.
But
it's like trying to handle a greased pig, as the expression goes. It's a tough one to hold on to, and I don't know. Hopefully we'll have more of these conversations to kind of work towards that. I would, again,
absolutely.
direct everyone. I don't know if your articles, from what I've read, I've enjoyed them. They're compelling, insightful.
Thank you.
Looking forward to reading more. Is there a direct URL, or just SEO Google
sure.
search of Samuel Handwich?
I believe it's a Medium. I'm trying to think. It's samuelhandwich.medium.com. Could you? Is it possible you can put that link in the the video description?
Yeah, we definitely we'll
Great.
definitely link to those. As I said, they're insightful. Seem to be writing them fairly often, once a week, every other
I try
week or so.
to. Yeah, I should have. I don't know when we're posting that, but I should have a new article out this week, talking about the problem with the trolley problem. So this is a fun one that I've had in the works a little. But yeah, it's just trying to get some conversations started. So yeah, definitely for anyone interested, if you want to check it out, read a few, and if you don't like what you see, like, one of the great things we can do that I think some of the Republicans and some of the Democrats are losing is we can criticize our ideas, and we actually get stronger that way by listening to that and by growing from it. So definitely love feedback. I love interaction. I love hearing from people, and just being a part of this movement is. There are times when you really see people interacting, you see people thinking creatively, like, how can we work together? And it's an awesome thing to see.
Yeah,
so,
couldn't agree more. Well, that's a perfect place to wrap up. Nate, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We'll post a link to your articles.
Okay, thank you.
Any closing remarks? Anything you're excited about in the immediate future?
The possibilities are endless.
As 2020 winds down and we gear up for whatever comes next.
Yeah. The future is what we make of it. So I'm excited to see where it goes. Excited and a little scared, but for now, excited. And
those two seem inextricably linked to me. Kind of two sides of the same coin.
They are.
Same feeling.
Oh yeah.
So.
Oh yeah.
They always seem to go hand in hand. It's always nice to lean into that excitement. So, we'll happy to have you around, and would love to have you back to explore more. So, can't wait to see. Thanks again for tuning in.
Yeah.
Take care, Nate. Take care, everybody else. We'll see you again soon.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in. For more conversations and content like this, be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you prefer: Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. If you prefer to consume your podcasts in video format, you'll find full episodes and clips on YouTube. Follow the UnityNow podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram by clicking the links in the description below, and be sure to sign up and get involved at articlesofunity.org. Bye.